In Ethiopia, livestock aren't just animals. They're a huge source of cultural pride, their economic stability. But what if that greatest strength was also the nation's most hidden vulnerability? That's what we're going to break down.
Okay, to really get a sense of the scale here, let's start with a number. 70 million. And that's just the cattle. When you start adding in over 200 million poultry, another 40 million sheep and goats, you start to see the absolutely massive scale of animal-human interaction we're talking about, happening every single day.
And that right there is the heart of the issue. The very same animals that are so central to Ethiopian life, they're also the main pathway for some really serious health threats. We're talking about zoonotic diseases. Those are infections that can jump from animals straight to people.
All right, so let's dig into this. Where does this risk actually begin? Well, it's not in some lab or because of one single event. It's actually woven into the simple, everyday routines that bring people and animals so incredibly close.
So what you see here, this isn't unusual stuff. This is the rhythm of daily life for millions of people. I mean, it's common for animals to sleep in the same compound as the family. Meat, often slaughtered right at home, no protective gear. Milk is sourced directly by hand, and kids are out playing in the same areas where animals, well, where they live and defecate. This constant, super close contact is really the foundation of the whole risk.
And all of that creates, a perfect bridge for germs and pathogens to cross over from animals to people. And we're not talking about a little cold here. We're talking about serious, sometimes deadly diseases, things like Salmonella, anthrax, and even rabies becoming a very real threat right in the community.
This risk also extends to some really deep-seated cultural food traditions. You've got these cherished dishes, like kurt and kitfo, which are made with raw meat. Delicious, but unfortunately, they carry a high risk of exposure to parasites and bacteria. Same goes for drinking raw, unpasteurized milk. It's common, but it can transmit some nasty stuff, like brucella, TB, and E. coli.
And this brings up a really crucial point. The goal here is absolutely not to get rid of these important cultural practices. No way. It's about building awareness, right? So people can adopt safer methods, protect their health, and still keep their traditions alive.
Okay, so we've seen how daily habits create these little pathways for disease. But now we need to look bigger, because there are these large-scale systemic forces at play that are basically turning these small streams of risk into a potential flood. One of the biggest challenges is what we call the surveillance gap. Catching an outbreak early is everything. But in a lot of rural areas, there just aren't enough vets or labs, so diseases can spread completely under the radar. Take anthrax, for instance. You might see a few official reports, but the reality? Most outbreaks go completely unreported. And by the time anyone even notices there's a problem, it's probably already spread.
And on top of that, you have three major forces just making everything worse. We've got climate change, rapid urbanization, and a general lack of public awareness. Let's break down how each one of these is basically a threat multiplier.
So first, climate change. It's causing these awful droughts, which forces herders to migrate further, right? Their herds mix with other herds, and boom, you've got a perfect storm for spreading things like tick-borne diseases. Then there's urbanization. As cities grow, you see more backyard farming in really crowded areas, which creates brand new pathways for germs in these dense spots. And kind of underlying it all is that low awareness. When people don't know the risks, simple life-saving things like washing your hands or boiling milk just don't get done consistently.
So, how in the world do you tackle a problem this complex and interconnected? Well, the good news is there is a clear path forward. It's not easy, but it's there. It just requires a really unified, all-in kind of strategy.
The question we really have to answer is this. How do you fight a threat that just doesn't care about the boundaries we draw between animal health, human health, and the environment they both share? It connects all three.
And the answer is an approach called One Health. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful idea. It says you just can't protect people's health if you're not also protecting the health of animals and the environment. It means you need doctors, vets, and environmental scientists all collaborating, all working together on the same team. And look, this isn't just some vague concept. It translates into a real concrete action plan. Step 1, expand vet services to help close that surveillance gap we talked about. Next, you educate farmers and households on basic hygiene. Then you improve safety for meat and milk all the way from the farm to the market. You regulate how animals are transported to stop diseases from spreading across regions. And, super important, you promote vaccination for both livestock and even domestic animals like dogs.
It's really worth pointing this out. Of all the fancy, high-tech solutions you could dream up, simple awareness and education
They are still the cheapest and most powerful tools we have to stop these diseases from spreading at the community level. It's huge.
So the big takeaway here is this. These zoonotic diseases, they're not just a veterinary issue, they're not just a farmer's problem, they're a national issue. An outbreak hits families hard, it damages the economy, and it puts an incredible strain on the entire health system. It's a shared risk, and that means it requires a shared responsibility.
Ultimately, the most essential first step is just this: understanding the risks, seeing how they're woven into daily life and how these bigger forces are making them worse. Because it's only when we see the problem with total clarity that we can even begin to prevent the next outbreak.
And that leaves us with one final thought. When you look at all these deep-rooted connections between people, animals, and the environment, the next outbreak isn't really a question of if, it's a question of when. So the real question we have to ask ourselves is, are we ready?